You might have heard that myostatin levels increase within 6 weeks of starting a steroid cycle, and that you need to come off steroids completely to let myostatin levels come back down to baseline. Otherwise, you're simply not going to grow any new muscle tissue anyway, even if you were to throw the kitchen sink at it. The scientific evidence is all over the place, but I'll make sense of it all in this video right after a word from our legal team. Vigorous Steve here. Let me briefly explain what myostatin actually is. Myostatin is also known as growth differentiation factor 8. It is part of the transforming growth factor beta superfamily. Myostatin is actually directly produced within skeletal muscle, where it serves as a negative regulator of total muscle fiber count and size and helps to maintain the overall balance of muscular development. Myostatin gene mutations usually result in an abnormal amount of muscle mass, even without direct stimulation through hypertrophy-specific training or the use of anabolic androgenic steroids. Belgian blue, anybody? Myostatin's opposing hormone, follistatin, also known as activin binding protein, is an endocrine glycoprotein which is expressed in nearly all tissues of the body. Follistatin binds myostatin and thus inhibits its negative suppressive effects on further muscle growth. Follistatin was named that way because early scientific evidence showed that follistatin inhibits the secretion of follicle-stimulating hormone from the pituitary gland. It used to be known as FSH-suppressing protein. Elevated follistatin levels usually increase muscle mass and also improve overall regeneration of damaged tissues. This is why there's so many follistatin gene therapies being investigated in the context of sarcopenia or muscle wasting diseases or other conditions where increased muscle mass and the regeneration of damaged tissues is desired. I mean, follistatin gene therapy and BPC-157, perhaps in combination with TB500 and growth hormone, that would be the ultimate Wolverine stack. In normal human biology, the interplay between myostatin and follistatin helps to maintain muscle mass and function and keep all of that in normal equilibrium. The scientific evidence surrounding myostatin and follistatin in enhanced fitness enthusiasts is a little bit conflicting, and when it's there, the scientific evidence literally is paper thin. Still, I did my fair share of reviewing all of the scientific evidence that's available to us regarding myostatin, follistatin, steroids, training, etc. Long story short, it appears that steroids do increase myostatin levels, but training decreases myostatin levels quite significantly. As always, all citations are down below, so you can do additional research if you want to. And guys, please be forewarned, there's a lot of scientific evidence which we need to cover in this video, so I'll go through the individual studies a little bit faster than usual, and fingers crossed that YouTube doesn't turn off the comment section again, which is where the citations can be found, in case you want to do additional research. It's like YouTube doesn't want you to do research and learn a little bit more on your own. Okay, that aside, let's get started with this study by Dalbo et al. Published on April 2017, titled Testosterone and Trenbolone Enanthate Increase Mature Myostatin Protein Expression Despite Increasing Skeletal Muscle Hypertrophy and Satellite Cell Numbers in Rodent Muscle. In this rodent model, they used Fisher 344 rats, which had their testicles removed. That's orchirectomized. Those who were treated with testosterone or trenbolone afterwards saw a significant 200% increase in myostatin levels in their remaining reproductive organs. So it's not exactly skeletal muscle, it's whatever was remained after the testicles were removed. Follistatin levels remained comparable among all orchirectomized groups. Unfortunately, this is not a study where the animals were trained. So I would advise, based on these results, not to get your testicles removed when you do use testosterone or trenbolone as a replacement therapy, obviously, because you won't be producing any natural testosterone or estrogen again, and trenbolone isn't exactly bioidentical. And even if you were to use HCG after you have your testicles removed, HCG is no longer going to work because there's nothing there to stimulate. So if you were to go that route, you might increase your myostatin levels in the penis or the prostate, which is obviously not what we're after. Still, scientific evidence that myostatin levels in organs we don't really care about in this context increases with 200%. Let's move over to the next study performed by White et al. Published in April 2003, titled Growth Factor Messenger RNA in Muscle and Liver of Steroid Implanted and Non-Implanted Steers. Steers are basically male cattle which were castrated before reaching sexual maturity. basically cattle that are the equivalent of SARM goblins. In this study, they implanted steroid Revelor S pellets consisting of Trenbolone acetate and estradiol. It appears that in the implanted steer liver, IGF-1 messenger RNA was 68% higher, so that's a big bonus. Skeletal muscle IGF-1 messenger RNA was about 50% higher, another bonus. But liver IGF-1 binding protein 3 was also 24% higher. So if IGF-1 levels go up between 50 to 68%, but binding protein also only goes up by 24%, that's a significant increase in free IGF-1 compared to the non-implanted steers. The researchers also note that muscle myostatin messenger RNA levels weren't affected by Revelor S treatment. So now we have one study with Trenbolone where myostatin levels go up, albeit in reproductive organs, and another study where Trenbolone acetate implants does not seem to appear myostatin levels in skeletal muscle, which is what we're after. But again, it's an animal model and the steer weren't exactly going to the gym, so take from this what you will, and hopefully you don't identify as a SARM goblin, which has its HPTA shut down indefinitely and thus needs to result to Trenbolone acetate with estradiol as a replacement therapy. Okay, moving over to the next study performed by Kamanga-Sollo et al., published on November 2004, titled IGF-1 messenger RNA levels in bovine satellite cell cultures, effects of fusion and anabolic steroid treatment. So this is an in vitro study using bovine satellite cell, which somewhat confirm the results from the previous study, an actual steer. It shows that higher Trenbolone concentrations raise IGF-1 messenger RNA levels more, so more Tren, more IGF-1, but it also results in lower myostatin messenger RNA levels, again in an in vitro study. Interestingly, the lowest Trenbolone concentration increased androgen receptor messenger RNA levels the most, but at the higher concentrations of Trenbolone, androgen receptor messenger RNA levels were comparable to baseline. So in this context, it doesn't mean that more Tren is better, right? And it depends what you want. Do you want more IGF-1, lower myostatin levels, or more androgen receptors? But hey, testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, and perhaps all other anabolic androgenic steroids seem to increase androgen receptor density and content of skeletal muscle quite favorably, like I mentioned in the previous video. And at least they didn't decline like so many people would like you to believe. Interestingly, similar to the previous study, estradiol increased IGF-1 messenger RNA expression, but also reduced myostatin mRNA expression quite significantly. So if we were to do some dubious extrapolation using the previous study and this study from these animal models, whether that's in vivo or in vitro, I would say that you need sufficient estradiol levels to offset this potential of myostatin increase and allow IGF-1 levels to come up as high as possible to further the anabolic effect that the Trenbolone sandwich will potentiate, right? So maybe estradiol is a regulatory hormone alongside anabolic androgenic steroids to keep myostatin levels under control and have favorable IGF-1 production. Again, animal models don't always translate to human models, but we can learn from it nonetheless. Moving over to the next study performed by Santos et al., published in 2012, titled Effects of Steroid Hormones on Myostatin Expression and on Genes of Muscle Regeneration Pathway. In this untrained rodent study, again, all of the animal models are untrained animals, this study showed that nandrolone decanoate treatment did not show an increase in myostatin levels, but did show a decrease in myogenin, MyoD, and MyF5 levels, which all play a crucial role in muscle differentiation. And the study is a little bit thin, but at least it's been performed on skeletal muscle in a rodent model. And if we see that myostatin levels don't increase following nandrolone decanoate treatment, that's a big thumbs up for decadurabolin. Moving over to the next study performed by Diel et al., published on February 2nd, 2008, titled The Prohormone 19-norandrostenedione Displays Selective Androgen Receptor Modulation, steroidal SARM, like properties after subcutaneous administration. In this study, administered orchirectomized rats, again, testicles removed, with either 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight testosterone propionate or 19-norandrostenedione at the same dosage daily for 12 days consecutively. Both compounds were shown to increase androgen receptor and myostatin messenger RNA expression in the calf muscle of the rats, albeit that testosterone propionate increased myostatin levels more, and 19-norandrostenedione increased androgen receptor messenger RNA more. And we can do some dubious calculation and extrapolation from this study using dose cal. At 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight daily for the rats, that equals about 16 milligrams daily for a 100 kilogram human being. So that means even a low dose TRT of, let's say, 110 milligrams testosterone propionate per week might already increase myostatin levels. And none of the TRT crowds would gain any significant amount of muscle mass at all. Now, you let me know down below if you ever ran TRT of 100 to 125 milligrams testosterone propionate or enanthate for that matter per week. Did you not gain any muscle mass? I didn't think so. And while there's another animal study that shows that both myostatin levels increase, but also follistatin levels following a spinal cord injury where they used either testosterone or nandrolone as a treatment option, since this is an animal study and there was no rehabilitation training, I'm going to omit this study from this video because none of us are completely immobilized when we take steroids. So enough with the animal studies and the in vitro studies. What about the human subjects? One study that we can highlight in untrained individuals, performed by Laxman et al., published on April 10th, 2009, titled Measurements of Myostatin Concentrations in Human Serum, Circulating Concentrations in Young and Older Men, and Effects of Testosterone Administration. Very good study, very interesting. Let's go a little bit more in depth compared to the animal studies. This study performed on young, untrained men aged 18 to 35 years old and older, untrained men aged 60 to 75 years old. So I'm trained and 40 years old, so I'm definitely outside of the sample size, as many of you guys are. But let's continue anyway. First, they made the young men and the old men androgen deficient with luprolide, a gonadotropin hormone releasing hormone receptor agonist, after which they received either 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams, 125 milligrams, 300 milligrams, or 600 milligrams testosterone enanthate weekly for 20 weeks in duration. So this is a high-dose testosterone enanthate study, which I mentioned in the best dose of testosterone video, which we dropped a couple weeks ago, albeit that the 600 milligram dose was ultimately withdrawn in the older men due to adverse effects. While myostatin levels went up in both young and older men at the first 1/3 of the trial on day 56, at the end of the treatment at a day 140, week 20, myostatin levels had mostly come down back to baseline. So they're very similar to where myostatin levels were at the start of the trial. During this 140-day period, dosages were not increased. So it's either 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams, 125 milligrams, etc. No incremental changes of dosages, albeit that, again, the 600 milligram dose was reduced to 300 milligrams, but that's calculated into the results. And this is very important to understand, and a huge flaw of this study, in my opinion. Participants were specifically instructed that they were not allowed to train during the treatment. So they didn't go to the gym or do any form of strenuous physical activity for 20 weeks while taking steroids. So, assuming you stay in the same dose for 140 days, which is 20 weeks or 4.5 months, and you're not training, then myostatin levels will ultimately come back down to baseline. Right? So how much of the TRT community taking 600 milligrams of steroids per week are not going to the gym? I don't think that that's many, right? But this is the only human study where they took steroids and measured how myostatin levels increased and decreased. And you know why these young men or elderly men were not allowed to train during their testosterone enanthate treatment? You know what really reduces myostatin levels? Heavy resistance training. This is well documented in the scientific literature, and yes, we'll get into it. But now you basically already know what to do when you take steroids that might potentially increase myostatin levels. Just go to the gym. Mitigate the potential for myostatin increase by bringing those levels down with heavy resistance training. And luckily, all of these studies have been performed on human subjects, but none of these human subjects took steroids. So we do have to do some dubious extrapolation going forward. Let's go over these a little bit quicker, right? This study shows that there's a 37% reduction of myostatin expression after 9 weeks of strength training, where the men and women performed unilateral knee extensions on one side of the body. So they compared the trained leg versus the untrained leg, and the trained leg had a 37% less myostatin compared to the untrained leg, as proven by muscle biopsies. This study showed that myostatin messenger RNA decreased from 1 hour to 24 hours after resistance exercise and running exercise, albeit that resistance training saw a far greater reduction compared to running exercise, which is all proven with muscle biopsy. This study shows that there's a correlation between the load placed on the trained muscle and the reduction of post-exercise myostatin levels. Basically, heavier weights reduce myostatin levels more. But it also seems that men with more muscle mass have higher resting myostatin levels, but they also observe a steeper decline in myostatin levels following exercise. And since bigger muscles can generally tolerate more weight, it appears that myostatin decrease following strenuous exercise is load dependent. So there's all the more incentive to train heavier, right? If you're already big, just train heavier so myostatin levels come down more. And then there's another study that shows that after 8 weeks of resistance training, myostatin levels reduced in both young and older men. So basically, training reduces myostatin. Point proven, I would say. And trust me when I say there's actually a lot more studies that show that myostatin levels decrease after various kinds of exercise, but most of those have been performed in sick or unhealthy people. So let's just omit those studies. Otherwise, this video will turn into a 2-hour behemoth, and nobody has time for that, right? Scientific evidence shows that myostatin levels decrease after strenuous exercise. So why not do that if you're worried about increasing myostatin levels when you take steroids? But for the sake of completeness, I will say that there's a single study that shows that heavy resistance training does increase myostatin levels, albeit that follistatin gene expression also went up. And the researchers also note that the apparent increase in myostatin did not seem to have a negative effect on training-induced increases of muscle strength and size. And maybe that's because all of the men in this study were previously untrained, and cortisol levels also saw a significant increase after 12 weeks of resistance training. And well, cortisol is known to increase myostatin levels and also suppresses androgen signaling by downregulating the expression of the androgen receptor. Right, so don't go too hard when you're just going to the gym, otherwise myostatin levels will go up and you might have a negative effect on your androgen receptors. Also because cortisol levels are so freaking high, right? Stay on top of your imodin and your ashwagandha root extract if you were to undergo such a strenuous experiment for 12 weeks. And I want to briefly highlight this study performed by Kim et al., published on September 4th, 2023, titled Recent Advances in Nutraceuticals for the Treatment of Sarcopenic Obesity. If you were to read one study of all the publications and citations, which I link down below, read this one. Very, very interesting. And since it's new, it's probably the most accurate study on myostatin, follistatin that you can read. It appears that irisin is one of the regulatory hormones that inhibits myostatin secretion during and following exercise. And apparently, S-L-cysteine found in garlic also reduces myostatin levels in skeletal muscle. So if you're abstaining from garlic because you're a FODMAP guy and you don't like to fart or smell bad at certain parts of the day, you might want to reconsider your practice. Because if garlic reduces myostatin levels specifically in skeletal muscle, then it might be able to offset the potential for myostatin increases that steroids potentiate. And unfortunately, of all of the studies that I was able to find, these studies did not investigate if myostatin levels go up or down, or if follistatin levels go up or down following training or before training or at rest in men or women who trained while using steroids. So to answer the question, what happens to myostatin levels and follistatin levels when you exercise on steroids? No clear scientific evidence to answer that, but we can extrapolate from the steroid studies regarding myostatin and the training studies regarding myostatin, right? All things considering, I would say go to the gym if you take steroids, and then myostatin is probably a non-issue. And you know what I found? This is very unfortunate, but I found a study performed on postmenopausal women, performed by Diel, Conwright et al., published on May 2012, titled Hormone Therapy and Maximal Eccentric Exercise Alters Myostatin-Related Gene Expression in Postmenopausal Women. So basically, it has been investigated regarding strength exercise and some sort of exogenous hormone in postmenopausal women using either estrogen or estrogen plus progesterone hormone therapy. Again, not exactly anabolic androgenic steroids, but it's better than nothing. In the study, myostatin levels decreased more following strength exercise in the women who were on hormone therapy compared to those who were not. So we have two animal studies where estrogen was able to reduce myostatin levels in, again, animal models using trenbolone, and now one human study where estrogen or estrogen plus progesterone is able to reduce myostatin more compared to not taking them, both in trained subjects. Estrogen and training. We might be onto something here. What's that? Not good enough? You identify as a heavily muscled, healthy man who takes steroids and also trains hard. Your pronouns are something along the lines of beast or bear or silverback gorilla. Well, I got just the animal studies for you to close this video off with. Let's highlight this one from Mosler et al., performed on August 5th, 2011, titled "The Anabolic Steroid Methendianone, the Anabol, targets the hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis and myostatin signaling in a rat training model." This rodent study shows that exercise plus the Anabol, again, it's an animal study, but this is the closest we're going to get. Exercise plus the Anabol only raises myostatin levels in certain trained muscles, but not in others. Its opposing hormone, follistatin, also increases in certain trained muscles. And then the study performed by Reitzner et al., published on June 2019, titled "Modulation of Exercise Training Related Adaptation of Body Composition and Regulatory Pathway by Anabolic Steroids," another animal model where they investigate the effects of exercise plus the Anabol, exercise or the Anabol alone. And the results show that exercise plus the Anabol significantly reduces myostatin messenger RNA compared to the control, exercise or the Anabol alone. Albeit that follistatin and activin messenger RNA were also significantly lower in the exercise plus the Anabol group, and perhaps that's because there's not so much circulating myostatin to bind to and inhibit. This study also showed that androgen receptor messenger RNA in the exercise plus the Anabol group is significantly higher than the Anabol only group, but still lower compared to the control and exercise only groups. IGF-1 levels were higher in the Anabol only group, so don't forget to take your Anabol on your rest days to offset the IGF-1 reduction on training days. And now we can do some dubious extrapolation again using the previous studies where estrogen was shown to reduce myostatin levels. Since Anabol converts into methyl estradiol, we might be able to speculate that estradiol has the most suppressive effect on myostatin levels, increases IGF-1 levels the most, and thus you should always have a testosterone base, even though testosterone propionate was shown to increase myostatin levels more compared to this 19-nor androstenedione SARM-like pro-hormone, basically, right? So again, the scientific evidence is a little bit conflicting. I would at least advise you that when you take steroids to keep your estradiol levels somewhat towards the top of the reference range or slightly supraphysiological, just to go to the gym. So to summarize, let's have a look at all of the myostatin and activin inhibitors. We know that strenuous resistance training reduces myostatin levels and increases follistatin levels in human subjects. Prolonged fasting over 72 hours increases circulating follistatin levels, but there's no change in myostatin levels in human subjects. And sleep seems to regulate circulating follistatin levels and might inhibit myostatin, which would otherwise have a negative effect on muscle growth. Vitamin D and its metabolites reduces myostatin levels, again in human subjects. Epicatechin reduces myostatin levels and increases follistatin levels in human subjects and animal models. S-allyl cysteine, found in garlic, reduces myostatin levels in animal models. Leucine, HMB-free acids, and creatine monohydrate inhibit myostatin-induced muscular atrophy and induces estrogen-1 normalization in vitro and in animal models, but there might be some practical applications for humans as well. Androgen sufficiency modulates myostatin and follistatin levels and prevents sarcopenia, but that's mostly in the context of muscle wasting in human subjects. And I already did a very extensive deep dive about 8031 and 8083 follistatin gene therapy. I'll link it at the end of this one. Looks very promising, but the practical application might be extremely limited because the dosages are very, very, very high, and thus the expenses and the costs are very high also. All right, let's go over these a little bit faster because these are still undergoing clinical trials or being investigated. There's BGE-105, azelaprag, an apelin receptor APG agonist studied in animal models. BYM228, bimagrumab, a human monoclonal antibody and activin receptor type 2B inhibitor, Follistatin isoforms 288, 300, 315, and 344, activin binding protein and myostatin inhibitors in human subjects, well investigated. MIO029, stamalumab, I believe that this is already discontinued, an immunoglobulin IgG1 antibody and myostatin inhibitor. REGN1033, trevogrumab, a human monoclonal antibody and myostatin inhibitor. REGN2477, geratosmab, a human monoclonal antibody and activin receptor type 2A inhibitor. And then there's YK11, a steroidal selective androgen receptor modulator, which increases follistatin levels only in animal models. So you'll have to do additional research if you really want to bring your myostatin levels down, because there appears to be many a way in the form of follistatin gene therapy or other kinds of human monoclonal antibody therapies that allegedly can reduce myostatin levels in cases of sarcopenia and muscle wasting diseases when there's full immobilization. I'm not entirely sure if any of these treatments will increase muscle mass when you're already on steroids and training insane. As far as I'm able to tell from all of the people that I've talked to regarding their anecdotal reports using myostatin or activin inhibitors or follistatin gene therapy for that matter, there seems to be no tangible changes regarding the improvement or increase in overall muscularity. But if you've undergone follistatin gene therapy, please reach out. I would love to hear your anecdotal reports and see if there's anybody out there who had a successful outcome with one of these very expensive treatments. And since many of these compounds have been around for such a long period of time, I mean, follistatin isoforms have been around for a very long time, very well documented on the steroids message boards. YK11 has been around for a long time also. And then vitamin D3 and its metabolites, leucine, beta-tor, HMB free acids, creatine. You would expect to see some 400-pound freaks out there. But besides Hafthor Bjornsson and Brian Shaw, who aren't exactly in the fitness industry, right? They're strongmen that are super tall and lift crazy amounts of weights. Besides those two, there's no 400-pound freaks out there. So long story short, just go to the gym to offset the potential myostatin increase that some steroids potentiate, some steroids, but not all steroids. It would be advised to keep your serum estradiol somewhat towards the top of the reference range or slightly superphysiological, because it appears that estradiol has a suppressive effect on myostatin levels, whether you train or take steroids or both at the same time. And if you're really, really worried about myostatin levels, just patiently wait on the same dose, because after 140 days, 20 weeks, or 4.5 months, myostatin levels will slowly come back down to baseline. But I think I'm of the firm, honest opinion that if you train during those 140 days, that myostatin levels will come down, even if the dosages increase, right? You can counterbalance by training harder and keeping your estrogen levels favorable. Food for thought. Don't worry about it. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't say that you're not growing anymore because your myostatin levels are elevated and thus need to come off cycle. What you need to do is eat more food, train harder, and then ultimately increase the dose. But I explain all of that in step-by-step cycle design video. I'll link it at the end of this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry for all of the scientific literature, but sometimes it's required. Citations are down below in case you want to do more research. For now, we're out of time. Let's leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the YouTube description section. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at VigorSteve. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A fully inhibited myostatin front double bicep for you guys, but all I need to do is wait 140 days. I'll keep this front double bicep going for 4.5 months, and then maybe at one point myostatin levels will come down and these cannons will explode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.